A few things like frosting and layering cakes may seem slightly more intimidating than it actually is. I don't consider myself as an expert, but over the last 1 year, I've picked up on a lot of tips and tricks that have helped me up my game significantly, and I'd love to share them with you. So in this video, we are diving deep into how to frost a cake perfectly. Let's get started. Tip number 1 is to bake in individual cake molds. Whenever you're trying to make a layered cake, the easiest way to do so is to divide the batter equally between different cake pans of the same size and bake them individually, instead of trying to cut a tall cake into separate layers after it's been baked. Tip number 2 is to trim your cake layers. Whenever we bake a cake, it usually has a dome on top, which is not ideal for stacking. So it's important to trim it off so you have a flat layer to work with. For that, I would suggest using a serrated knife which has a tooth-like edge and is perfect to cut through things which have a hard exterior and a soft interior. While using a serrated knife, move it in a sawing motion going back and forth like so, which would prevent you from getting too many crumbs. To achieve the perfectly flat top, it's also important to let your cake cool completely before you start working with it. If you try to work with a warm cake, it'll be very delicate and can break easily. Tip number 3 is to work on a flat surface. Whenever you're layering cakes, it's important to work on a surface that is steady and flat, and a turntable like so works perfectly. I got this one on Amazon and I'll link it for you in the description box below. It's important to invest in a good quality turntable that can actually take the weight of all the layers instead of getting a one that is cheap and made of plastic. After you've placed the cake board or plate on your cake stand, smear some frosting before placing your first layer of the cake, because this helps hold your cake in place while you're trying to build on the layers. The next tip is to use sugar syrup. Because layering is a time-consuming process and requires refrigeration, it's important to brush each layer with sugar syrup so that it doesn't dry out and stays moist even in the fridge. Tip number 5 is to use a frosting that is stable. It's important to use a frosting that is not sloppy but stable so that it holds everything together and doesn't move around while you're frosting the cake. You could use a buttercream frosting, a chocolate ganache, or cream cheese frosting. I've done recipes and detailed videos on all of these on my channel earlier, and I'll leave links to them in the description box below. If you feel your frosting is too flimsy and sloppy, let it rest in the refrigerator for a couple of hours so that the fat in it firms up and makes your job easier. The best way to start is to put your frosting into a piping bag attached with a round nozzle and pipe it around the edges of your cake to make a well. Now this helps you achieve a neater look, and you could use this well to add in fillings of your choice or add in the same frosting, for which I would recommend using an ice cream scoop or a measuring cup to ensure that you add in the same amount of frosting between each layer. Now while placing the second layer on top, make sure it's in the center and aligned with the layer below it. This would help you achieve a straight stack. Once all your layers are in place, the next step is to crumb coat your cake, which means spreading a thin layer of frosting on the sides and the top. This helps you lock in any loose crumbs and helps you achieve a neat look once you do the final layer of frosting. To do this, an offset spatula is ideal. It looks like this, it's very easy to handle, and it helps you reach all the sides and corners and spread your frosting evenly. And once you've crumb coated your cake, it's important to refrigerate it for at least 1 hour before you do the final coat of frosting. Now for the final coat of frosting, I like to again pipe some frosting around the edges of the cake. This helps me ensure that I'm adding equal amount of frosting across the entire height, and then use an offset spatula that we used earlier or a bench scraper to achieve smooth sides. To achieve a neat layer on top, I like to use my offset spatula to bring in all the excess frosting from the sides towards the center. So if you're a beginner or just getting into the world of making tall layered cakes, I hope these tips were helpful to you. If you'd like to watch more of these videos on my channel, let me know in the comments, and I'm also happy to answer any more questions that you may have regarding frosting and layering cakes. I'll see you guys next week with another video. Until then, happy baking.